So, welcome to your first panel, the Math and Science panel. As you can see, we have 6 lovely people, alumni, here today to talk to you about math and science. I think they're all really representative not only of kind of the science subjects that we study here at the university, but they're really an excellent representation of the potential career paths that you guys can take. So before we get started with the panel introductions, I just want to introduce the fellow student coordinators. So I'm Lakshmi Sundaresan. I'm a third year in the college majoring in biochemistry and anthropology.
I'm Brian Olson. I graduated in 2006 with a BS in geophysical sciences. I work for an engineering firm, small firm in the suburbs of Chicago. And I guess something interesting, I really like baseball. I'm a huge baseball fan, so I played baseball at the college, so, and a Cubs fan too, so.
All right. My name is John Laux. I graduated from the college in 2002. I was a math major, as well as a kind of a potpourri of other things along the way. I work for Aon Corporation, which is the big tall building just north of Millennium Park. I work as an actuary, so I'm using my math. And we'll say more about that in due course. Something interesting about me. For the last several months, I have taken up boxing as a physical activity, which is a bit different from doing math, but it's rounding me out quite well.
Okay. My name's JC Conrad. I graduated from the college in 1999 with an SB in mathematics. Probably for my educational history, I'm an assistant professor of chemical engineering at the University of Houston, despite having 0 degrees in engineering. And other of interest, I run half marathons and was a challenge level square dancer.
So, I don't know. All right. My name is Shewat. I graduated from UC 1990 with a degree in chemistry. So right now I work for Ethica Endosurgery. That's a medical device, and it's part of the Johnson & Johnson company. And what I do there, I work with the management there to help assess the health of the company, things like how we're doing financially, people having the opportunity to learn and grow, and also own a process improvement program. So what I really use there is really the critical thinking and problem solving skills that I started developing when I was at the university. So something interesting about me, I actually had a lot of hobbies, but right now what I enjoy most is to spend time with my 2-year-old chocolate Labrador. His name's Mocha.
Yeah, just into the mic a little bit more. Can everyone in the back hear? Yeah? Okay, good.
Okay, my name's Eric Landau. I graduated in 1994. In physics, I also fulfilled the requirements in public policy except for the senior thesis. I am a physics professor at DePaul University at Fullerton and the Red Line. I've been there for about 3 years. Previously, I had a career as a government scientist in several different national laboratories. I've had no time to develop any interests. Thank you for laughing, actually. I do a few triathlons now and again. That's about it right now. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Joe Sage, and I graduated from the college in '96, and then I graduated from Pritzker in 2001. Well, actually, my interesting thing is I'm moving to Oregon in like 2 days, and my former job, I was the program director for the combined internal medicine pediatrics residency program and an assistant professor at Case Western. And for those of you that don't know, internal medicine is doctors for adults, and program director is you go to med school, and then after med school you gotta go to residency, and the program director is the one that makes sure the residents are competent physicians when they graduate.
I'm Andy Lum. I'm an internist, so I'm glad he explained what we do. But I graduated from UC in 1981, so I'm the old guy on the panel. And I work now for Kaiser Permanente and have done a lot of different leadership roles for them, including being the CEO for the medical group. And one interesting thing about me is I have a daughter named Sarah, and she's sitting in the audience. She came to spend the weekend with me here in Chicago.
All right. So now that we've finished our lovely panel introductions, start thinking about what kinds of questions you would like to ask. So I will just be directing, I think, a couple of questions towards the panel, and hopefully that'll get you guys thinking. So my first question is, how did your undergraduate studies relate to your current field of interest? And if you studied something different from your current field of work, how did you make that transition, or what kind of first introduced you to your current field? I guess we're going to start on this end.
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, with geophysical sciences, what I'm currently in as a water resources engineer, to be quite honest, they really have nothing to do with each other. And when I first was hired, the skills that I was able to offer was a clean slate, and basically they could train me in however way they wanted to, and just offering practical problem-solving skills and also a science foundation. I didn't start in engineering to begin with. I was more permitting, like with the EPA, working with developers and also home builders. And it was a pretty difficult transition because I basically had to learn on the fly. I was told we're just going to throw you in the fire and we're going to see how you do. And I'm still there, so I guess things have gone pretty well. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely been been pretty enjoyable. A very steep learning curve. And it just, it definitely taught me to, you don't really stop learning, and you don't stop taking tests either. I think I've taken 4 or 5 certification tests, so that really never ends. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely was a very rewarding path that I've taken. Hopefully, it'll keep going. So.
Just out of curiosity, how many of you actually know what an actuary is? Because it's a little. That's pretty darn good. Okay. For those that didn't raise your hands, it's I could say more about it individually, but it tends to work in insurance or consulting, statistics, probability, math. So, given that I majored in math in college, it looks like I made a fairly straightforward transition, but it really wasn't. I got my math degree from Chicago. I then spent a year in graduate school studying Eastern philosophy at St. John's College, which was really just for fun, and had a great time doing that. And then my first job out of college was at McMaster Carr Supply Company, which tends to recruit heavily from UC. And they like liberal arts majors, so that was sort of how I got that. From there, I then got my current job at Aon. I felt like I'd kind of gone too far the other way. I guess in college for me it was abstract analysis and algebra and very theoretical to like working in a warehouse, managing people, doing really hands-on, just operational stuff. And I wanted something in the middle, but closer to the first one. So I passed an actuarial exam, and then there's a series of them. We have 9. Which I actually just finished my last one. It's been 5 years. The actuarial profession has its own series of certifications, and so it wasn't so important to me, or so important what I did before that, but showing that I knew what I was getting into, that I could do probability, that I knew that I was going to have a series of these things to pass, I guess got me that first job. And I think from that first job I had a lot of operational experience that I was able to bring into this. So I guess for me, I found that whatever it was I was doing, I've brought something along from it to where I'm at right now.
Okay, so my undergraduate degree was in mathematics, but I also finished about 3/4 of a physics degree, and I knew I wanted to go into graduate school in physics, which is what I did. The work that I ended up doing as a graduate student was not very mathematical, not very traditional physics. It was actually very sort of muddled. What I do roughly is look at things like paints, suspensions. This is actually work that, ironically enough, is very popular in the physics department at Chicago. It's one of the leading places for that, but I didn't do it when I was here. So one of the things I realized after I got my PhD, I knew I wanted to go into academia, so I took a postdoc. That was actually academic field number 3. My postdoc was in materials science, where I learned a lot more about what that was, and engineering. And I really liked engineering departments as a discipline. They tend to be a little bit less stuffy. They don't ask you, is what you're doing blah? They don't actually care, as long as you can pay for it and you're doing cool stuff. So I think the way that I approach, so I'm going to bring that back. The way that I approach problems tends to look very much like a University of Chicago student, and tends to look a lot like how a mathematician or physicist would go about things. But the sorts of systems I work on are really dirty and messy and a lot of fun.
Okay. So I actually got my chemistry degree from the university. So for those who are Asians, like my family really value education. So it was just like by default that, well, after the BS, why don't you get a PhD? So therefore, I was in UCLA enjoying my sunshine, and then occasionally go to the beach, and then to a point that my thesis advisor actually said, Shewat, I think as a graduate student, I think you should spend more time in labs. So there was then I started to think about, what do I really want to do? What am I really good at? So that I still decided to pursue a postdoc like most of the people in academia, and then I make a deliberate choice that I want to pick a field that's more applicable. So therefore, I ended up at City of Hope National Medical Center, and where I developed a potentially more effective cancer treatment for breast cancer. So they kind of opened the door for another aspect of research. Like what are the potential applications for research, and what can I do with that? So having doing 3 years of postdoc, then I decided to get an MBA, because I was at the point I realized that research wasn't really for me. Not that I didn't feel it was very challenging. I just feel that I would want to explore and really broaden my experience. So therefore, I applied for business school at University of Michigan, and afterward, I joined Ethicon Endosurgery. So currently, I feel that the transition was really difficult, because there are always myths about how scientists and mathematicians communicate. So that if you would like to expand more about that, feel free to tap on my shoulder after the panel. I can tell you all the stories about that. So the key thing is that throughout my career, when I was in college, I never would have imagined that I would end up in the corporate world. So my recommendation is really that it is okay that if you don't know what you really want to do in 10 to 15 years, even though some of you do, that's great. And for those who don't know, life is really a journey. You take one decision at a time, and you find out that, hey, I really like it. You keep going at it, and then if it doesn't work, you find a different option. So where I am at work, I really apply my critical thinking and problem-solving skill. That's really something that a balanced education at the university really helped me to develop.
I spent about half my time teaching physics and about half my time doing physics research, so obviously it was a fairly appropriate preparation. My public policy major was very useful during the time that I was a government scientist and having to navigate those very large bureaucracies, and actually was maybe the most useful part of my undergraduate education.
So I did a BA in chemistry, and then I went to med school, blah, blah. That's all kind of normal. I guess the way I would relate it, though, is I was talking to my boss about a year ago, and I was like, I got up in the middle of the night to use a bathroom. I had this thought that we should look at the problem this way, and then she looked at me and she said, you think too much. And I didn't understand what she was saying, and I think that that's what I took out of my undergrad education.
So, chemistry was great because it taught me to work hard, and I think whatever field you end up going into, you're going to do better if you work hard, no matter what the job is. Even if it doesn't directly relate, work hard and you'll do better.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Sage and Dr. Lum, I guess maybe the two of you can speak to this most directly about some of the difficulties that you've faced in preparation for applying to medical school and that whole process. What was most difficult about coming from the university and going to medical school and applying, kind of your theoretical knowledge to your career?
So I'll jump right in there. I graduated from a public high school in Hawaii and spoke more pidgin English than regular English. And so coming to Chicago was such a shock. And I had to have a writing tutor who worked with me the whole first year so that I could write English. And, it was a lot of work and a lot of extra work for me. So it was a big obstacle, as well as the snow. The snow wasn't as big, though. It was more fun. having sort of that cultural shock of, and by the way, my public high school is a stone's throw away from Obama's school, but they had all the money and all the nice things, and we were, we were the public school. And so the obstacles, I think, one of the biggest for me was when I was applying to medical school, frankly, it was hard for me to get accepted into a medical school because my grades were okay, but not really super great, and my MCATs were okay, but not super great. But here's where one of those wonderful things about the University of Chicago, if you go into medicine, everybody's heard about the University of Chicago, and so having a degree from there, it helps you just a little bit extra, and it was a real positive for me, and I ended up finally getting on a wait list my first year that I applied, which was right after undergraduate, and then got back to my home state of Hawaii to go to medical school.
So I guess so when I was an undergrad, when I was in high school, I did everything I wanted to do. I did great. It was wonderful. And then when I got to college, my second year, the wheels kind of came off. And then I realized that, I don't think I'm smart enough to do everything. And in fact, Eric and his now wife was on the swim team, and his wife lectured me about not asking for help when I needed it. And so I learned there that I just had to really buckle down and focus on getting to med school, which is pretty much all I could do. And so that's what I did. And then the nice thing is, so I interviewed at Pritzker, and I kind of wanted to go there. And then I interviewed a couple places, but Pritzker waitlisted me. And then I got into a different medical school, and then I thought, what did I lose? So then I wrote a big letter to Pritzker saying, oh my God, please not waitlist me, let me in, I want to go there. And then they let me in. So I guess the learning experience is you should always ask. It's never anything wrong to ask, and it worked out well.
Sure. Maybe Mr. Olson, Mr. Locks, and Dr. Tsai, you can talk a little bit about why you left academia. I think for a lot of students at the university, we hope to stay in academia, but maybe you can talk a little bit about your decision to leave, or the fact that you never wanted to be in academia at all.
I'll take that one to start. So I remember being in the math department at U of C, and it seemed like the general consensus was you were either going to go on to, you were going to go to grad school. That was kind of what people assumed you were going to do. I did an REU program after my third year, that summer, and so that was my taste of it. And I found that it was 8 weeks, and I did some cool research. I had a good time with it, but I had the experience, and I just realized, I don't see myself doing this for the rest of my life. And I could say more than that, but that was my experience. And so I think I found somewhat circuitously that the actuarial profession for me is kind of like being in school about 20% of the time while you're taking exams, because you have a structured curriculum, you have a body of knowledge that you're developing that you also get to apply on the job right away. And so that was kind of my hybrid, my way of kind of continuing to educate myself and learn, but in a business setting. And I think I also found that my communication skills, my skills working with people and stuff, I found a better natural fit outside of academia.
I know me personally, kind of put it quite simply, I really don't like doing research too much. I mean, no offense, a lot of people that do. If I have to write anything more than 5 pages, I kind of break out in a cold sweat. But yeah, and I just even when I went for my master's, I did a non-thesis route because I wanted more classes, to kind of teach me how to be an engineer. And so, really that was kind of my whole life. I've kind of been that way. Writing really has never been my strong point. As an engineer, you still have to write things. You have to dictate how you came to certain conclusions, but it's not as intensive as doing research. And I think that was what I was looking for. Was a more practical career. And I guess, like I said before, research is just really never my thing. So, but.
Okay. And actually, like I mentioned before, that I wasn't really spending so much time in the lab, and then they really sent me a message that perhaps that's really not the path for me. And also another thing, I guess, is really reality check for me, because there was the time that I was looking at the postdocs in the labs, the graduate student lab. They really have very difficult time in finding jobs. So I started to think about that. Well, do I really want to dedicate myself to academic research? And do I have the passion for that? And I do think that to make it, I have to really passionate about what I do. So really, for business school, then I started to talk to people, and that speaks to another thing, that it's really important to start establishing your network right now. That I start to talk to people and ask about their experiences whenever I go to science conferences, and I will go to workshops, and then gradually I carve out a path that let me just try to apply for business school and just go from there. So at the time when I applied for business school, I still had no idea that I would really end up in the corporate world.
And I guess maybe we can talk a little bit about the converse, Dr. Conrad and Dr. Landell. Maybe you can speak on why you chose to stay in academia, or maybe about some of the experiences you had as an undergrad that made you decide to stick with hard subject matter.
So I didn't learn much physics as an undergrad at University of Chicago. I was poor at classes. I was underprepared. I was also from a public school, from Southside Chicago Public School. And part of what's motivated me as a teacher is actually to do a much better job of it, frankly. I was motivated by doing research. I enjoyed doing research, and that's the thing that kept me going throughout my undergraduate years. I continued to do research at the Large Accelerator Facility, the APS, that I worked on helping build as a co-op student. One of the oldest, longest-serving users, actually, of that facility, despite my otherwise fairly young age for a new physics professor. And keep in mind, this is my second career, actually. I'm starting off after some time as a government scientist. I came back to teaching because I wanted to interact with students. I wanted freedom to pursue my own research programs. As a government scientist, I was quite happy, although I was also quite overworked. I should say, as a cautionary note, it's very difficult to find an academic position. DePaul is a great place to work and a wonderful location. Certainly not a Research One university, but there's still 350 applicants for my job. If I hadn't been already one of the best in the world at what I did, they wouldn't have looked at it.
Maybe Dr. Conrad, you could say a little bit on this too?
I think, well, for me, I love what I do. I love what I study. I've told you I study paint. I study now also microbes on surfaces. This is fascinating. It actually carries through the rest of the things that I do that are less fun. I can go along those in length. One thing about being in academia, I think, is you have to want to work with students. That's frankly one of the reasons I'm here today, because I love interacting with students. I love doing that, and that's why I chose academia as opposed to positions in government labs, for example, where I have a lot of friends who are working. I like having the flexibility to set my own research agenda. That's the other big one. That's something that's really unique to academia. And everything has good and bad trade-offs, so that's the trade-off. I like being able to set my own agenda. I love working with students. I'm sort of tired of writing grants right now.
I guess going in a bit of a different direction, maybe you can all say something to the effect of what you think is the best part of your job, and then conversely, what's the worst? Maybe we can start with Dr. Lum on the end.
I'm an extrovert, so I think when I hear myself talk out loud, especially on questions like that. So what do I like best about my job, and what do I like worse? When I was running the 500 doctor medical group, the thing I liked best about it was being in charge and directing my schedule. The thing I liked worse was when you're a leader, it really takes a lot of time and energy. And frankly, as an internal, I stepped down from that role, and I'm now doing the full-time practice. I love taking care of patients, and frankly, I spend a lot less time because I work 4 long days versus 7 days a week.
Yeah, I would agree that the worst part about the program director job was the 100-hour weeks to whatever. It was hard. The best part, though, is it's really fun to be a mentor. And actually, I precept in resident clinic, and precepting residents is really cool. Like watching people develop their thought process, and then you can smell it when they don't know what's going on, and you can kind of help them figure out how to think better. So that's really fun. And then the nice thing about being a doctor is most people who are doctors like taking care of patients, and that's just sustaining. But
Also, like Joe, I think I enjoy most being a mentor and mentoring students. That's really the highlight for me. And because I deal with students only up through master's degree and not beyond, most of them go on and they do really interesting things, and they keep me up to date with it. And I really enjoy that. Of course, no one likes grading and papers, and no one really likes writing grants either. And I agree with that. And there's nothing worse than a lecture that goes really terrible or a class that doesn't seem to like you. But those aren't such horrible things or so frequent that they're too discouraging for me.
What I like the most about my job is that I get to work with a lot of the different groups in my company to help solving their problems like are there any process improvement that they need to be doing, help them to set up measurement system and help them collect data. So it's really, I think it really goes back to the core of myself, that maybe perhaps like at heart I'm still a scientist, that critical problem solving. And what I like the least about, or I would say what would be sometimes be very frustrating, is the consensus building process, because as you know, in order to implement any changes, it's not just that I go along, I need to bring everybody else along, and sometimes it can be very challenging that knowing that not everybody would come along with me.
So I don't want to talk about grants. I'm a first-year professor, so that's really what I do right now. That's why it's sort of always the first thing. I think the thing that I love, and it's why I'm still doing what I'm doing, is I really love to talk about science. I love to put together arguments, and I love writing. I love doing it. I am sort of sick of grant writing, but even grant writing is sort of interesting when you sort of start to think about how to plan out, if I really want to test this thing, what sort of experiments do I need to set up? I love writing scientific papers. That sounds extremely dorky, but I love doing it. It's a lot of fun. It's way more fun than writing grants. I even love, this is even worse, I love writing response letters to referee comments. So, which if you get journal, I love it. It's like being a lawyer, but fun. Because you get to argue a lot. So, I mean, those are the things that I love doing about my job. Working with students is fun. I have a new lab space. I have fancy tools. All of that's really a good time. So again, I've already talked a little about the bad things, but I want to say there are really a lot of pretty awesome things about what I do too.
Thanks. I'll answer this a couple ways. What I like about my job. Math majors making money. I'll take that for the first one. The actuarial profession, it's a good career, and you get paid well. So I'll just put that out there. I would say kind of the obvious thing to like about it is and I think I said this already, it's a good combination of you've got a curriculum, you've got a skill set that you're developing, you're taking math, you're applying it to the real world, to the financial sector, you're making decisions that involve managing risk, and so you're learning and you're also getting hands-on experience at the same time, and I think it's a really cool combination. The thing that I don't think I had a great handle on right away, but as I've developed, I've realized just that there's a tremendous amount of flexibility in the profession as well. I mean, actuaries can work in government. Many of them work in insurance, and you can build statistical models and just develop really cool concepts for things. They also tend to work in consulting, which is the area that I tend to concentrate in, which is much more, it stretches that other skill set about engaging with people, finding out what's important to them. So there's a tremendous amount of flexibility to it, and I think that's really cool. People think actuarial science is a niche, but it's actually, there's quite a bit in that niche. Probably the biggest downside, I think people tend to know, the exam process is rigorous and some probably say grueling. I think the average length of time to get through them all is about 8 years. And you're working while you do that, so it's not like you have to get them all done and then start your career.
Each day is different. I get to go out in the field sometimes, and hopefully it's nice and warm, and except for now when it's cold and freezing and all that. But it's definitely each day is different, and it's nice. Probably a downside, with consulting, there are times when you're at the whim of the client, and there's one particular instance where I was basically, working on a report and had it pretty much all ready to go out, out to the printer, and we had discussed, a certain calculation with the client, and then it was pretty much done, and then the client calls up and is like, about the one calculation, let's do it this way. We're just like, thank you. And so pretty much had to stay up late and get it done. So it's you're definitely at the whim of the client, and the client is usually always right. So, but if there is a downside, that would be it. But
I would add that one to my list too.
And I guess these will be the last two questions I ask you, and you can choose which one you answer. So first, maybe if you can talk a little bit about some of the hobbies that you had during your time as an undergrad and how that influenced you or how that helped you get through, the rough stuff in your career path, or conversely, or not really related, maybe the best advice that you could offer to a current student who's trying to get where you are today. And maybe we can start with you, Dr. Lum, on the end.
Okay, hobbies. I audited a computer class when I was an undergrad, and back then it was Fortran, and we actually had the cards that you put in the machine, so dating myself a little bit. But it was quite a while back. But it was so fun because I'd never really played with computers much. And what that did was it turned out it was sort of a bit of a passion for me, and it turns into my advice for you. Let your passions guide you to your strengths, and then focus on your strengths, because that's where you're going to succeed. For me, what that passion did was when I got, my career moved me around. I went from Chicago to medical school in Hawaii to UCLA, where I did my residency, but then I started to work, and I had a passion for computers, and they put me in charge of a group of physicians with Kaiser there. That passion then took me to Colorado, where we raised our 4 kids, and in my work side, it helped me lead the medical group to adopt the computers, and later brought me to other roles because I got chosen as one of the physicians to help Kaiser Permanente, an organization, choose Epic as the computer system to use. But it was that passion for something that was just a little hobby that really helped me focus on an area of strength. And if you tend to do that, you're probably going to succeed. Let your passions guide you to your strength, and then work hard in your areas of strength. Yeah, you have to keep up, the other things that you don't do as well, but don't spend 80% of your time there. Spend 80% of your time on your strengths.
Okay, so my hobby was studying. No, I'm just kidding. But, so the piece of advice that I wish I had received earlier than I got it, my parents were both first-generation college students. They went to community colleges, and then I'm the first doctor in my family on both sides. And I really had no idea what it took to be a doctor. I didn't know what it meant to be a doctor. I just knew that I wanted to be one. And so the thing is that, so my wife has a bunch of interesting friends, and so what I've learned as I'm getting older is that you need to surround yourself with interesting people, because then you learn a lot through osmosis. And we were at dinner like 6 months ago with this woman who's pretty cool, but then she said something to me about, we're talking about personal board directors. So she says that everyone should have a personal board of directors. And what that is you find people you identify in your life that have done what you want to do, or they just have insight that you don't have because their life experience has been different. And then you call upon them for help. And so if I could go, so give you an example, when I was in med school, as a 4th-year med student, my dean of the med school said, Joe, you should consider going into PM&R, which is a different specialty called physical medicine rehabilitation. I'm like, what's that? And for a 4th-year med student not to know about a specialty, that's pretty bad. And so I think what I would say is, for people who are interested in undergrad and pursuing a career of any sort, you need to find people who have been there and talk to them and let them be your personal board of directors to kind of at least give you insight. And not other students, but like people who have actually done it, like experts.
I think this is excellent advice about letting your passions become your strength. An advantage of being a professor is that your passions can become your research, and your passions can also become your teaching. We're encouraged to go out and entrepreneurially develop classes and things that we find interesting, and hope students will also. As far as advice, I do have advice for undergraduates who are considering a career in research, and it is this. It's to go do it and to start now. It's not too early as a freshman or a sophomore to go out, start knocking on doors at the university. The professors are not as intimidating one-to-one as they are in front of a classroom, and they'd probably like to hear from you and maybe even have them work in their laboratories. The Metcalf Fellows Program, which helps you get a paid position at Argonne, is an excellent one that's available now to undergraduates in the sciences. So any opportunity you have to do research, if you want to do that in the future, start practicing now. The skills you pick up from working in a variety of different labs will always come back to be useful later, and it'll help you make up your mind as to whether that's really your calling or not.
I want to add on to Andrew's comment. It's really that you need to really think about what are your strengths, and believe it or not, that's something that I started to look into about 3 years ago, because I often wonder that how come I always did really well on problem solving and not on other aspect. And the thing is that because that you are utilizing your strength, and then you're naturally good at it, so that's going to help you to be much more successful than really working on your weaknesses and trying to turn that to your strength. So once you have discovered your strength, really work very hard, and in the process, when you make decisions, trust that you make the best decisions given what you know, and knowing that your career is still very long. So even if you miss a step, it's still okay, because you can always stand up again and look for other options. And also in the process, do not forget to connect with your friends, your family, because there will be times that you will feel that, oh, darn, I really screwed up. You will really need their support at some point.
Okay, I'm gonna tie the two questions together because it's sort of an awesome metaphor. So when I was an undergraduate, I played women's rugby. So if you don't know about rugby, you have two halves of people. One half of people form a formation called a scrum. It's 8 people. You can look it up online. But the key point is that requires teamwork. So the first thing I have to say to scientists is network. Your connections are the most important thing you can develop. You're going to rely on your colleagues and the people around you. Recognize that now. Start building those connections. The second thing is it's rugby. What do? You eventually, in the end, you put your head down and you run. So you need to be fearless. I've followed what I wanted to do, and it's sort of unorthodox. I told you I'm teaching in a field in which I have 0 degrees. The undergrads sort of find that funny. A lot of them find that very funny. A lot of them think it's complete bollocks. But if that's what you want to do, then you can do it. So those are the two things I'd like to say.
I'm probably going to pick up on some of the themes that have already been hit here. Yeah, I think the actuarial profession is maybe a little different than some of these other ones in that it has its own series of qualifications that, quite frankly, it sort of doesn't matter what you did in college as long as you can pass those exams. I mean, you don't generally have poetry majors taking actuarial exams, but if they were also taking calculus and statistics, then they might come out all right. So the thing that I think I would emphasize is really enjoy the time while you're in college, stretch yourself well. I personally did not take a lot of statistics when I was in college. I started out as an econ major. I went to math. I liked pure math, and I stuck with that. But I also took some computer science and some physics, and I got to my job, and I found that I could program pretty well. Not everyone necessarily has that experience. And I would also emphasize, this is the math and science panel, but this is the University of Chicago. The core work that you guys are doing is indispensable, and there's a spark that many of you have because of your intelligence, because of your curiosity. Quite frankly, most of you, if you pursue what you're doing long enough, will end up in leadership positions, and you're going to have to deal with people. You're going to have to deal with a whole set of issues that have nothing to do with what you study in college. But that's where your extracurriculars, your curiosity, your engagement are all going to come into play. And I think your humanities courses, your social science courses, I think emphasize that as much or more than the specific hard skills that you're learning and what you're doing now. And the last thing I would mention, to kind of take your theme, is really to take some risks. And at the start, that may seem very small. Every job I've gotten through initially making contact with someone from the University of Chicago Alumni Careers Network. So if you get nothing out of this thing today. Know that people like now us are here for you to help you as you start making these decisions. The first time I picked up the phone though and called somebody, I was terrified. That was a big step for me. Now that would be an easy step for me. But there are other things. I changed careers. I quit a job to finish studying for an actuarial exam, to jump into a career that I thought I cared about and that I was going to thrive at, and it worked. And I'm really glad I took that risk. And I think it's an easy thing to, as Dr. Lum was saying, focus on your strengths, develop your strengths, and I totally agree with that. At the same time, you're also at an age where you may not fully know what your strengths are, and it behooves you to explore that, to mess things up, to do some things and find out. You may find something that you haven't even touched yet that you absolutely love, and that is part of your process of developing and finding your way as well.
I know a hobby that definitely helped me get through my years at Chicago. I kind of mentioned earlier, I'm a huge baseball fan. I love baseball. I played baseball at the college, and obviously, as you all know, this school is pretty rigorous, and lots of problem sets, exams, so on and so forth. And pretty much every day, I had 2-3 hours where I didn't have to think about that. I was with my friends, and it was fantastic. I got to travel. Got to go to Arizona every spring break, for free. So that was fantastic. But if that compares, I'd imagine all you have interests outside of what you're studying. Make sure you have an interest outside, because I know for me, those 2-3 hours kind of helped me to, basically like refresh myself. And then once I knew, all right, now I got to buckle down, I got to get my work done. It definitely helped me to, to find the energy, to get everything done. And in terms of just a little piece of advice, it sounds incredibly cliche, but don't stop learning. I learn something new every single day. And you'll probably hear that all the time, but it's the honest truth. Just don't stop learning. You see an opportunity, grab it and go for it. So.
Thank you. Okay, so this concludes our panel. So if everyone can just give our panelists a round of applause, please. And now we'll just have some time for questions. So Stephen is going to walk around with a microphone. If you could just raise your hand, or you can either direct the questions to the whole panel or a specific member if that's what you'd like to do.
Don't be shy.
Practice asking questions.
Yes.
Yeah, there is some up here, Stephen.
This is directed towards Dr. Sai.
Yes.
I was wondering what originally kind of moved you to go from a much more laboratory-oriented career to dealing with corporate and managerial positions.
Mm-hmm. To answer your question, there was actually a journey for me. As I started pursuing my graduate degree, I started to find myself spending a lot of time doing extracurricular activities, go out and talk to people, go to parties, and also like help organizing lots of events on the UCLA campus. So they really brought me to think that what am I good at, and what am I going to do with my career? So that going back to the importance of network, so I started to ask my thesis advisor when I go to conference. I wasn't really shy to go up to the conference speaker from pharmaceutical company, asking them that what were they experienced, and how do I get there. So because of that, I started to collect information. They helped me to formulate different options for me. At the time, I had the option of finding a position in industry just to see what life is like in industry. And there's also an option that why don't I go back to school, because I really love school, and going to school is really one of my strengths. So then I decided, then I went ahead and applied for business school, and I have to say that there was a really difficult transition. I applied for about 6 or 7 schools, and then each application, as you have experienced it, nowadays applications are just really difficult to do, and really convince them that I can enrich their student body. They have something to bring to the business school. So after business school, I got an internship and joined ethical endosurgery. At the time, I did not know that I was going to be offered a full-time job. All I knew was that I had to work really hard, and I did work really hard. So they recognized my accomplishment, and then after that, they offered me a full-time job. And even if you get your foot in the door in the corporate world, it's still a learning process, because what I was doing 7 years ago, it's totally different from what I'm doing right now. I hope that answered your question. Okay.
Was there someone else up here that had a question? You had one, right? Oh, no. Okay. Are there any others? Yeah.
Hello. This is based off of Mr. Lau's comment, but how would you recommend that someone of our age group ask you, either any of you or someone who's already in the profession, for guidance? Because I feel like a lot of what some of that fear of asking for help comes from is we don't want to involuntarily like offend somebody or come across as too pushy or anything like that. So, but we don't necessarily know how to present ourselves. So do you have any thoughts on that or recommendations?
I can speak to that. Oh, no.
Oh,
You speak.
go ahead.
Okay. Well, actually, you're not alone. Sometimes I still feel the same way. When I had to go and talk to senior management, I still feel the same way. So the thing is to really help you prepare. You have to start somewhere. You have to start some cold call. So what you can do is you can find someone from the career office and just start practicing. And then after this event, you know who we are. You can use us as guinea pigs. And you really get better and better, and to a point that you feel comfortable about it. You want to set a conversational. And then one of the key things I learned is that what worked well for me is really articulate what the other person can do to help you, short of asking for a job. So it's really asking for advice. Just kind of explain, this is where you are and how you got my contact information, and try to make a connection, and then go from there and let the conversation take you.
Yeah, a couple things to add to that. I think that was good. I think the CAPS office had some really good workshops for fourth years around writing a resume, writing cover letters, doing that kind of stuff. And I kind of started out just following those. And in a way, it wasn't exactly maybe right. I think they always said, address something to dear Mr. or Miss. And, the first thing that I got when I started talking to people was, like, oh, don't call me Miss Conway, just call me Hillary. Cultural things change. But it was not at all a bad place to start from. I think erring on the side of being polite is great. Quite honestly, I think it's that fear of being pushy is something that I think maybe we all have unnecessarily so. I mean, sometimes if he hadn't asked to get into the med school, he wouldn't have gotten in. Sometimes there's a value to being pushy, but not to do it in a rude or a really direct way. I think one of the things I found most valuable about my job search is, I guess I'll say two things, was kind of taking off what you were saying, this concept of an informational interview as opposed to a job interview. It's totally cool just to reach out to people, alums or just people you meet through your networks or LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever. Just say, hey, I'm trying to get some information about management consulting. What can you tell me? Or I'm trying to get apply for graduate programs, and I appreciate your input. Most people would love to reach out to you and and give you some feedback. What you don't want to do is say, I'm looking for a job. Can you help me? Because it's much more direct. And I think in a lot of cases, I may not know of a job opening, but I can tell you something that might help you lead to one. So I think that's always a great way to lead in. And often when I've asked for information, it's turned into getting a job offer, or at least knowing who they could give my resume to, to facilitate that. And the last thing I would say about networking along those lines is it really is a numbers game, and at least it took me a while to realize that. Most of us are busy people, and if one of you reached out to me and said, hey, John, can you tell me something about the actuarial profession? Despite my best efforts, I may not respond to you because I might be totally swamped. Or I may find it in my inbox like three weeks later and then get back to you. But it really is about casting a wide net, reaching out to as many people as you can. There's really no harm in it because not everyone's going to get back to you. So be entitled, ask a lot of people.
Okay, this is a two-part question. The first part is directed towards the panel members who are currently professors. What exactly is the, because I understand that after grad school you usually apply for a postdoc, and then after postdoc, how do you get your appointment? And how long approximately does that take?
Okay, so I did this, okay. I'll tell you, you're not going to like the answer. So I did this, I applied for jobs in the fall of '08. If you remember what was historically going on in the world, there was an election, there was an economic crash. It was the worst of all possible times. So what happens, and this is field specific, is job postings come out in somewhere between July and December. They're posted on professional websites for different society organizations. They tell you what you need. Typically, you need a research statement of length somewhere between 1 and 10 pages. Sometimes they'll specify, sometimes they won't. You will need your CV in some standard academic format. You need a 1-page statement of your teaching interests. Occasionally, they want other things from you as well, like a supplementary budget. They'll give you instructions, you send those off. This is all field specific as to when that happens, but then there'll be a second round where they start contacting you to ask for interviews. Typically, the rule of thumb I was told, which was 40 applications, 4 interviews, 1 job offer, okay? I'm just telling you those numbers. I can tell you where I did better or worse, but you can ask me offline. So interviews start, depending on field. Chemistry interviews are pretty early. Their interviews are actually done by the end of that calendar year. Engineering interviews after the turn, so does physics. So you do interviews. These are 1 to 2 day interviews where you meet with faculty members. The key goal here, and I cannot stress this enough, is you need to convince them not that you are a technical superstar, because if they interview you, they already think that you are, but that you are going to be a good colleague for somewhere between 6 and 30 years. Okay, that's the whole point. You need to be a good person. Then the waiting starts, okay? So this takes about, and then you wait for them to give you an offer. If you get more than 1, then you get to start to negotiate. Anyway, you're still trying to get money, startup packages. Does that sort of answer the process for you?
Apparently, so after you get your postdoc, how long will you stay in your postdoc position until
It really depends.
Okay.
It depends on how well you've done with your graduate career. It depends on how well you've done with your postdoc. Depends on what you want to do. So I've had friends get jobs straight out of graduate school and take 1-year postdocs. I've had no friends take no postdocs. Almost everyone does a postdoc now. Engineering didn't used to. I've had friends stay as postdocs for up to 6 years. Okay, it really depends.
And I guess, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
So my path is just very different. So very briefly, I never did a postdoc. I took a position in a national laboratory as a staff scientist, first at the Stanford Linear Accelerator Center for 3 years, and then at Argonne National Lab for 5 years. And I applied for only 1 academic job, which I received, and I took the offer.
Wow, congratulations. So I guess the second part of my question is, for those of us who do not want to go into academia, we hear a lot about industry. So what exactly is, because I don't really understand the difference, because we are in an academic, like our whole lives we've been going to school, so I kind of see the academia portion of these fields, but what exactly is the industry like? Like describe like your everyday, like what do you do? And how is that different from academia?
That's a good question. Honestly, I'd probably, the one word I would describe it best as, it's just, it's more practical problems, I guess. And when I say practical, I just mean it's much more concrete. There's flooding on a road, fix it, basically. Things like that. Whereas I guess research would be you know, we're trying to figure out like a new solution to this problem, and
Build
you
a
know,
better road.
yeah. So I guess that would be.
It's more like you're building the asphalt, or you're building the compound that may eventually become the asphalt.
Yeah.
But in 10 years from
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably the best way I can think.
So, can I answer this?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. The way I look at that, it just speaks about that the different time frame. So, say for example, in the area of medical device, there are actually research on that. What are the things that engineers can do to build like a better medical device? And then in industry, it's about taking the second part. How do you make it in the larger scale? How do you find the market segmentation? How do you market to them? And how do you make your company financially viable? So I do see that there's the difference is like where they are in terms of timing. The academia world is more of a discovery, new ideas, and basic research. And in the industry, it's more of amplifying that and bring it to those who need them.
Can I just add?
Oh, please.
Don't forget about the third route of working in government. As a government scientist, you don't have to write grants. I worked for a facility that was a line item on the congressional budget, so salary was very secure. You have a lot of money, which even at a bad economic time, it's really nice to know that the money's always coming for research. And you get to do a lot of really exciting big science stuff you can't possibly do in either industry or in academia often. So there's a third route, and it's actually a pretty good one, despite the fact I left, but it's a good one.
The facilities at national labs are generally much better too. They're sort of unbelievable until you go see them. So, I said Sandy earlier.
Okay, so I think this concludes our panel. If we can just get one more round of applause for our panelists.